Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing good. Welcome to my class. My name is Pooja Dwivedi and today we shall understand India's relationship with the Global South. Of course, many of you must have heard of this term, the Global South. It has been gaining recently a more prominent position in our international relations. So from the perspective of GS Mains Paper 2nd, we have to understand what is the Global South. And mind you, it's not just a geographical term, it's more of a geopolitical term. I will tell you the difference as well. And why are we even discussing it? Because India has hosted the second Voice of the Global South Summit today only, and many important things will emanate from here, specifically for your paper. That is why it is important to remain engaged with this class till the very end and not to at all worry about notes, because notes are provided through my Telegram channel Pooja Dwivedi UPSC. If you have any queries, you can talk to me on my Instagram. Follow me on my threads for continuous updates. So India has hosted the second Voice of the Global South Summit on November 17, 2023, and it was through a virtual format, digital format. The inaugural session or the first summit was actually held in January 2023 only. So you can see in less than a year, we have gotten to another summit. Now, the VOGS summit is an initiative which has been started by India. Sometimes UPSC can also ask us the inaugural themes, the theme that was for the first summit and the current summit. So the first summit had the theme Unity of Voice, Unity of Purpose. There is a group, which group? The Global South group, that needs to have a collective voice. A collective voice in the world. Gone are the days when North dominated the Global South. It is time of the Global South to carve its own niche, its own position in the world. So the voice of the Global South actually brings 125 countries together. Most of them completely lie in the southern hemisphere, but not all of them lie in the southern hemisphere. Specifically, if we are going to talk about China, China is still considered a part of the Global South. As I told you, this is a geopolitical term rather than a geographical term. Moving on, the theme of the current inaugural session was Together for Everyone's Growth with Everyone's Trust. As you can see, this is the inaugural leaders session. We will also have the concluding leaders session, the first and the last. So the inaugural leaders session as well as the concluding ones, they also have their own themes. And these are dominated by the heads of states. For example, the Prime Minister of India. And the concluding leaders session will have a theme Global South Together for One Future. The specificity of the current session was, the current summit was, to showcase what India has achieved for the Global South as a part of the Global South under its presidency, the G20. The most prominent of them being the welcoming of the African Union as a part of the G20. And what and how India maneuvered its way in the highly divided world, that is also very important to be showcased. So this was there. The second VOGS summit is structured into 10 sessions. There will be different sessions. And the inaugural and the concluding will be the heads of state level. When we talk about ministerial, there will be 8 ministerial segments as well, such as for finance, health, education, trade, foreign ministers. So these are the different sessions, ministerial meetings that are going to be held. India will establish, this has been the outcome of today's session, India will establish a Global South Center for Excellence. It will undertake research on development solutions or best practices of any of our countries, which can be scaled up and implemented in the members of the Global South. This was from the opening remarks of our Prime Minister. India has inaugurated it by the name of Dakshin Development and Knowledge Sharing Initiative Global South Center for Excellence. Alright, moving on. Now, of course, in order to understand the voice of the Global South Summit, we have to know about the Global South. Global South is a geopolitical term that is centered around geography. Geographically, there are most of the countries that lie in the southern hemisphere are underdeveloped, developing, or least developed as compared to the global north, which is the richer section of the world. Economically better. When it comes to the standard of living, it is better. They are performing really good on the indexes, different indices. So here comes the divide. The global north, which is economically better. It is also better when it comes to its political institutions. It is better when the question is citizens' representation. Then we have the global south. The global south is a toned down version of the third world nations. The word third world actually became synonymous to poverty, corruption, banana republics with tin pot dictators. But now we have to ensure that we are not synonymous to all these. That is why the term global south has gained prominence now. So we have to look at the origin. If we have to talk about the origin, we have to talk about Carl Oglesby. He was the one, when he talked about the Vietnam War in 1969, he said that Vietnam War is nothing but the culmination of global dominance by the North over the global South. So the global South, the term started being used more so often in replacement of the term third world. Who actually divided the world as first, second, third? Let's talk about that. It was Alfred Sauvage in 1952 who actually looked at the world according to his own understanding of the French society, who were the nobility, the clergy, and the bourgeois. The bourgeois is basically the middle class and the lower middle class people of any nation according to the French political system. And similarly, he framed the entire world according to his own observation. So the first world were the advanced capitalist nations, second world, socialist nations who were led by the Soviet Union. And the third world were developing nations, many at the time still under the colonial yoke. Now, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, so did the usage of the term the third world. Because of course, after 1991, it started, you can see how it peaked between 1970 and 1990. But as soon as the second world that was being led by the Soviet Union, it collapsed. Then when the Soviet Union collapsed, the currency of this word, the third world, also became out of use. Also, the synonymous usage of the third world when it comes to poverty, corruption, political systems which were not idealistic according to the West. These were the terms that were also synonymous with the concept of third world. So none of the countries now would like to be known as third world country. However, when it was published in a more neutral and positive sense. But the connotation it had after a period of time that made its usage kind of a slur. Moving on. Now we have to understand the global south is shifting. It is projected that by 2030, 3 of the 4 largest economies will be from the global south. As of now, China, India, Indonesia, these will top the charts. The GDP in terms of purchasing power of the global south, dominated by BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa nation, it surpasses that of the global north's G7 club. There are now more billionaires in Beijing than in New York. Other than this, politically, the global south has been able to maintain its own position in the global scenario. It is also championing many causes. For example, China's brokering of Iran and Saudi Arabia's rapprochement, which the West couldn't do. Brazil's attempt to push a peace plan to end war in Ukraine. Also, many African countries joining their own hands together in order to tell the world that we are not at the receiving end of the West anymore. India's own stance on Israel-Hamas war and Russia-Ukraine war. So much pressure was put on India to severe relationship with Russia. Trade relations as well, but India didn't listen to it. India had to walk its own line, and India did. Today also, as we speak, Dr. S. Jaishankar did say that the world should thank India that it softened the global inflation because the West couldn't buy oil from Russia, but India did, refined it and imported it to the West. So it was a win-win situation for at least India and the West. So global gas and global oil supply was not impacted that much. Other than this, of course, India towed its own lines. So these are the certain things which also makes India a better choice when it comes to leadership for the global south. G20 presidency outcome, who can forget the inclusion of African Union it was something that everybody wanted from the global south. But it was only under India's presidency and coaxing, not China's, that the G20 became a part of the African Union became a part of the G20. Now, what is India's approach towards the global south? First of all, India's approach is consultative in nature. We do not dictate. We have never called ourselves the leader, but yes, the emerging voice. We are an emerging voice along with other voices, but the primary voice will be India's, because we have always talked about people-centric approach when it comes to the global scenario and not elite-centric approach. Outcome-oriented we are demand-driven, and equal treatment is given to everyone. And that is why India is and has been the emerging voice of the global south. Other than this, India was always seen a traditional leader or a voice in the global south scenario. When Papua New Guinea said that Pacific Islands will rally behind India at global fora, that is also very important for India. When nations who believe in collective voice, when they come together and choose a democratically elected leader, that is India, that will of course carry the goodwill of India through the West and the European nations. Non-aligned movement, of course, India was at the behest of smaller nations who were just came out of their colonial experiences. When they couldn't find a voice in a divided world, in a two-polar or bipolar world, India was the one which along with other countries started the non-aligned movement. Africa, Asia, Latin America and other regions of the world in 1961 believed that socio-economic development, restructuring of the international economic system is important, not being a part of any other group. Group of 77, which was established in 1964, talked about collective economic interest and enhanced their joint negotiating capacity on all major international economic forums. G20 presidency. When African Union became a part of the G20, it was nothing short of a huge victory. Other than this, India also ensured that a consensus is made on the G20 statement. That was something nobody expected. And more than that, in that entire statement, Russia was not at all condemned. Russia was not even mentioned. So these are nothing but the many manifestations of India's policy towards the world and the global south. But there are many challenges. The biggest challenge is the challenge or the competition between India and China. Who will be the most appropriate leader of the global south? If we talk about China, through its Belt and Road Initiative, through its constant exorbitant interest loans that it is giving, through its policy of divide and rule, through its policy of conquering the entire South China Sea, China is trying to develop a hegemon image in this region, but it will not succeed because India is a benevolent power, has been a benevolent power, and a benevolent power is needed in the current scenario. There is need to carry out reforms in the multilateral decision-making process. What should be the definition of terrorism? What should be the definition of climate change? What should be the definition of other terms which do not actually have any definition? But a definition is needed there so that collective accountability as well as collective response can be given. When you do not have a definition, it becomes really hard to give them a collective response or a collective understanding. So that is needed. For terrorism, at least we can all agree to a particular definition so that we can collectively be accountable and responsive to it. Needs to reinterpret normative idioms in global politics. There is a power that is known by normative power. A power that is used by the West. What is normal and what is abnormal. So when you give an impression of something being very normal, and because of your interpretation other people are also thinking it to be normal, then you can be a leader in the chaos. So we have to interpret the normative terms as well. Democracy, climate change, terrorism, these are the areas where many countries of the global south do not look eye to eye. And when they do not look eye to eye, there is a challenge of consensus, challenge of a response which is very adaptive in nature. So these are the certain things that we have to keep in mind. I hope you understood today's topic well. That's it for today. You can write a really good answer when it comes to Global South from this particular class. I hope you do, and we will see you again with our next class. Until then, stay updated. Also subscribe to my channel for the notes. Thank you so much.